Welcome to the Galactic Academy, where the brightest minds from across 17 star systems come to learn, grow, and occasionally wet themselves in terror. Today we're visiting the most notorious classroom in the entire institution, Room 42B, home to Xenobiology 101, where the dropout rate is higher than the Academy's insurance premiums. The course catalog describes it as an introductory study of interspecies biological relationships. What it doesn't mention is that it's taught by Professor Krekstar, a 7-foot-tall Vorthak warrior whose idea of a pop quiz involves actual predator-prey demonstrations. His office hours are listed as by appointment only, bring your own medical insurance. The classroom itself looks like it was designed by someone who really wanted students to feel uncomfortable. The walls are lined with preserved specimens of things that probably screamed when they died. The lighting is that special shade of ominous that makes everyone look like they're about to become a cautionary tale, and the temperature is kept at exactly the point where you're not sure if you're shivering from cold or existential dread. Today's class roster includes the usual suspects. There's Pip, a Squawkian whose species evolved from something resembling a cross between a mouse and a panic attack. She's sitting in the back row, clutching her tablet like a security blanket. Next to her is Thrum, a stonoid whose granite-based biology makes him technically the hardest thing in the room, yet somehow still manages to look nervous. And there's Zilla, a flutterby whose rainbow wings keep twitching with anxiety, creating a light show that would be beautiful if it weren't clearly a stress response. Then there's Jake Martinez, the only human in the class. Actually, scratch that. Jake's the only human brave enough, or possibly stupid enough, to voluntarily sign up for this course. While his classmates look like they're attending their own funeral, Jake sits in the front row, with the enthusiasm of someone who just discovered a new nature documentary. He's got his notebook ready, his pen clicking in that annoying way that normally drives people crazy. But honestly, given the circumstances, it's probably the least threatening sound in the room. The door slams open with the subtlety of a small explosion. Professor Krekstar enters, and the temperature seems to drop another 10 degrees. His scarred hide tells the story of someone who didn't just study the food chain, he climbed to the top of it, using other species as ladder rungs. His eyes scan the room with the calculating gaze of something that has never, not once, wondered what it might feel like to be prey. "Greetings, future dropouts," he rumbles, his voice carrying the kind of authority that makes grown diplomats reconsider their career choices. "Today, we begin your education in the most fundamental truth of existence. Everything in this universe falls into one of two categories: predator or lunch." Jake raises his hand. Actually raises his hand, like this is some kind of normal Tuesday morning biology class and not an introduction to cosmic horror. "Yes, human." "Quick question, Professor. Is there any chance this class comes with trigger warnings? Because I'm pretty sure my roommate's therapist is going to want a heads up about what I'm getting into here." The silence that follows could be used to preserve food. Even the specimens in the jars seem to pause their eternal floating to see how this plays out. Professor Krekstar stares at Jake for a long moment, probably trying to figure out if this is bravery, stupidity, or some bizarre human mating display. "Human Martinez, in my class I am the only trigger warning you need." Cool. Should I be taking notes on that, or is it more of a general life philosophy thing? And that's when everyone realized this semester was going to be very interesting. Professor Krekstar moves to the center of the room with the kind of fluid grace that suggests he could disembowel you before you realized he'd moved. The holographic display behind him flickers to life, showing a 3-dimensional representation of what the catalog euphemistically calls the Galactic Food Web, but what everyone else recognizes as a comprehensive guide to who eats whom and how much screaming is involved. "The universe operates on a simple principle," Krekstar begins, his claws extending slightly as he gestures. "It's probably unconscious, but then again, everything about this guy screams apex predator having a casual Tuesday. There exists a hierarchy of dominance that has governed survival for millions of years. At the top, you have species like mine, the Vorthak." The hologram shifts to display a detailed anatomical breakdown of Vorthak physiology. Retractable claws, reinforced skeletal structure, and what appears to be a secondary stomach specifically designed for digesting things that probably didn't want to be digested. It's like looking at evolution's answer to the question, what if we made something specifically designed to ruin everyone else's day? We are what your primitive human languages might call apex predators. We fear nothing, hunt everything, and have never, in our species' entire history, been prey to anything else. Krekstar's chest swells with pride, which, given the size of his chest, creates a visual effect roughly equivalent to a mountain having feelings about itself. Pip squeaks something that might be a question, or might just be the sound of her existential crisis reaching critical mass. Ah yes, Miss Pip raises an excellent point. Through her involuntary terror response, how does one recognize a true apex predator? Krekstar's smile reveals teeth that look like they were designed by a committee of sadists. Allow me to demonstrate. What happens next will be burned into the memory of everyone in that room for the rest of their hopefully long but statistically unlikely lives. Krekstar draws himself up to his full height, his chest expanding like a biological air raid siren warming up. The sound that emerges from his throat isn't just loud. It's loud in dimensions that physics hasn't discovered yet. It's the kind of roar that reaches directly into your brainstem and starts flipping switches labeled, oh God, we're all going to die." The effect on the class is immediate and comprehensive. Pip doesn't just freeze, she achieves a state of stillness that might qualify as a new form of matter. Thrum, whose granite-based biology usually makes him immune to most forms of intimidation, begins making small whimpering sounds that seem to emerge from somewhere around his geological core. Zilla's rainbow wings lock in position, creating a display that would be beautiful if it weren't clearly the biological equivalent of a system crash. The specimens in the jars actually try to hide behind each other. The plants in the corner curl up their leaves. Somewhere in the distance a fire alarm goes off, probably just from sympathetic vibrations. And then there's Jake. Jake, who should by all rights be reduced to a quivering puddle of human-shaped terror, does something that defies every law of biology, psychology, and common sense. He pulls out his phone and starts recording. "Whoa, that's incredible," he says, holding up his device to get a better angle. "Do you mind doing that again? The acoustics in here are amazing. You're getting some serious resonance off those specimen jars." The roar cuts off abruptly. Professor Krekstar stares at Jake with the expression of someone who just decided that gravity has decided to take a personal day. "I mean, seriously, Professor, that's some impressive vocal control. My neighbor has this Harley that makes a similar sound when he starts it up in the morning, but you've got way better projection. Have you ever considered voice acting? Because I'm pretty sure there's a market for intimidating narrator work." The silence that follows is so complete that you could hear a pin drop in another solar system. Krekstar's jaw works soundlessly, as if his brain is trying to process information that simply doesn't fit into any existing category of reality. "Did you just," he finally manages, "compare my primordial roar of dominance to a motorcycle?" "Well, I mean, if we're being technical about it, your frequency range is probably wider, and you've got that great reverb thing going on. Though I gotta ask, is this something your species can do from birth, or is there like training involved? Because if there's a technique to it, I'd love to learn." Somewhere in the back of the room, Pip makes a sound like a tea kettle having an existential breakdown. The applause starts slowly. 1 clap, 2 claps. Then Jake gets into a rhythm, and honestly, the acoustics in the room really do make it sound quite impressive. It's the kind of slow, appreciative clapping you might hear at a jazz club after a particularly moving saxophone solo. Except, instead of appreciating musical artistry, Jake is applauding what amounts to a biological weapon, designed by Evolution's R&D department. "That was fantastic, Professor. Seriously, I'm getting goosebumps over here." Jake gestures to his arm, where indeed tiny bumps have appeared on his skin. Is that a fear response? Because if it is, it feels weirdly pleasant. Like a really intense bass drop at a concert. Professor Krekstar blinks. It's possibly the first time in his adult life that his ultimate display of predatory dominance has been met with constructive feedback and a request for an encore. "Human Martinez," he says slowly, as if testing each word for structural integrity before releasing it into the wild. "You do understand that what you just witnessed was a demonstration of apex predatory dominance, designed to trigger primal terror responses in potential prey species." "Oh, absolutely," Jake nods enthusiastically. "And you totally nailed it. I mean, look at everyone else." He gestures around the room where his classmates remain frozen in various states of biological system failure. "Pip over there has achieved what I can only describe as tactical invisibility through extreme stillness, and Thrum, I didn't even know granite could sweat, but apparently under the right circumstances, anything is possible." Thrum makes a sound like pebbles being slowly crushed by existential dread. "But here's what I'm really curious about," Jake continues, completely oblivious to the fact that he's treating a predator-prey demonstration like a TED Talk. "Do you take requests? Because I've got a roommate who keeps leaving dirty dishes in the sink, and I feel like your vocal technique could really help with conflict resolution." The professor's eye starts twitching. It's a small thing, barely noticeable, but on a creature designed to be an apex predator, even minor signs of confusion register like seismic activity. You want me to intimidate your roommate about kitchen hygiene? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds silly, Jake admits. But have you seen the state of our kitchen? I'm pretty sure something is evolving in the coffee pot, and not in a good way. Your roar could probably scare it back to whatever primordial dimension it came from. Zilla's wings twitch in what might be an attempt at flight, but she's still too paralyzed by the earlier demonstration to achieve liftoff. She manages something that looks like interpretive dance performed by someone having a panic attack. Furthermore, Krekstar says, his voice carrying the strained patience of someone trying to get a derailed conversation back on track, you seem to be missing the fundamental point of this exercise. That roar is designed to identify and incapacitate prey species through activation of deep-seated survival instincts. Right, totally get that, Jake says, nodding along like they're discussing the weather. And it's super effective, obviously. But can I just say, from a technical standpoint, your breath control is amazing. Like, that had to be at least 15 seconds of sustained vocalization at maximum volume. Do you do any cardio training, or is that just natural lung capacity? Natural lung capacity, Krekstar answers automatically, then immediately looks confused about why he's discussing his fitness routine with what should theoretically be a terrified prey animal. That's incredible. You know, back on Earth we've got these things called death metal vocalists who would absolutely kill for that kind of range. Well, not literally kill, that's more of a figure of speech, but you know what I mean. I do not know what you mean, Krekstar admits. What is death metal? And that's when Jake's face lights up with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for people who have just discovered their favorite hobby and want to share it with everyone within a 3-parsec radius. Oh man, Professor, you're gonna love this. So death metal is this earth music genre where the whole point is to sound as intimidating and apocalyptic as possible. There's lots of screaming, really aggressive rhythms, and lyrics about things like cosmic horror and existential dread. It's basically your entire species aesthetic, but set to music. Professor Krekstar stares at Jake for a long moment. In the background, Pip makes a sound like a balloon slowly deflating, which might be her attempting to restart her respiratory system. You have music dedicated to cosmic horror. Oh, we have music dedicated to everything. Horror, death, war, heartbreak, taxes. If it exists, humans have probably written a song about it. Some of them are even good. Professor Krekstar's confusion is starting to transform into something that might be concern, which, on a creature designed by evolution to be the ultimate killing machine, looks distinctly unsettling. It's like watching a shark develop feelings about its life choices. Human Martinez, he says, his voice taking on the tone of someone trying to explain basic physics to a particularly enthusiastic golden retriever. I believe there may be some fundamental misunderstanding about your species' position in the galactic hierarchy. Allow me to clarify. The holographic display shifts again, this time showing a detailed breakdown of human anatomy. Compared to the previous display of Vorthak physiology, it looks like someone entered a house cat into a competition designed for tigers. No claws, no natural armor, no obvious weapons systems, and what appears to be a skeletal structure made primarily of wishful thinking and calcium supplements. Observe, Krekstar says, gesturing at the display with the air of someone presenting irrefutable evidence. Humans possess none of the standard predatory adaptations. No natural weapons, no protective integument, no enhanced sensory systems for tracking prey. By all established metrics, your species should have been extinct within the first few generations. Oh yeah, absolutely, Jake agrees cheerfully, as if they're discussing his favorite sports team's latest losing streak. We're basically nature's participation trophy. No claws, no fangs, can't even see in the dark properly. Plus, we're ridiculously fragile. I once knew a guy who threw out his back sneezing too hard. The other students are starting to show signs of life again, mostly because their paralysis is being gradually replaced by morbid curiosity about watching their professor attempt to educate what appears to be the galaxy's most optimistic prey animal. Precisely, Krekstar says, looking relieved that the human finally understands basic predator-prey dynamics. So you can see why, according to all established biological principles, humans should occupy the bottom tier of any ecosystem they encounter. Makes total sense, Jake nods. We're pretty much designed to be somebody's lunch, which is probably why we got so creative about the whole survival thing. Creative? Oh yeah, super creative. I mean, when you're basically a walking Happy Meal in a universe full of things with more teeth than a dental convention, you've got to get innovative about staying alive. Professor Krekstar's expression shifts slightly. There's something in Jake's tone, a casual confidence that doesn't quite match the biological reality being displayed on the hologram. It's like hearing someone discuss quantum physics while juggling chainsaws. Technically impressive, but fundamentally concerning. What kind of creativity are we discussing here, Human Martinez? Well, for starters, we figured out how to make tools pretty early on. Sharp rocks, pointy sticks, that sort of thing. Then we discovered that if you tie a sharp rock to a long stick, you can poke dangerous things from a safe distance. Revolutionary stuff, really. Pip makes a sound that might be interest overriding terror, which is probably the first time in the history of Squeakian evolution that curiosity has defeated mortal fear. Tools are not uncommon among species, Krekstar points out. Many creatures use implements to aid in survival. True, but then we figured out that if you heat up certain rocks, they melt, and when they cool down, they're much harder and sharper, so we started making better tools. And then we realized that if you put the melted rock in different shapes, you could make tools specifically designed for different kinds of killing. The room temperature seems to drop a degree or two. Thrum's geological composition makes a grinding noise that sounds distinctly nervous. Different kinds of killing? Krekstar asks, and there's something in his voice that wasn't there before. It's subtle, but it sounds almost like professional interest. Oh yeah, we got really specific about it. Tools for killing at a distance, tools for killing up close, tools for killing things that are bigger than us, tools for killing things that are trying to hide from us. We developed an entire science around the most efficient ways to make other things stop living. Jake's enthusiasm for the subject is genuinely unsettling. He's discussing the development of weapons technology with the same cheerful energy that most people reserve for talking about their hobbies. Which, in a way, is exactly what he's doing. And then, Jake continues, warming to his theme, we figured out chemistry, which opened up a whole new world of creative possibilities. Poison arrows, explosive powder, chemical weapons that could kill entire armies without anyone having to get their hands dirty. Armies. Krekstar's voice has gotten very quiet. Oh right, I should probably explain about the wars. See, the thing about humans is that we're really good at killing other humans. We've been practicing for thousands of years. We've had wars that lasted decades. Wars that spanned continents. Wars where we developed entirely new technologies just for the purpose of killing each other more efficiently. Zilla's wings have started trembling in a way that suggests she's reconsidering her major, possibly her entire educational path, maybe even her life choices up to this point. We had one war where we figured out how to split atoms and turn them into bombs that could destroy entire cities. Another war where we developed guided missiles that could hit targets from hundreds of miles away. And we've had so many wars that we actually categorized them. World War I, World War II, we numbered them like movie sequels. Professor Krekstar is staring at Jake with the expression of someone who has just realized that the harmless-looking creature in front of him might actually be the most dangerous thing in the room. Possibly in the building. Potentially in the solar system. You wage war against your own species? Oh, constantly. It's like our favorite hobby. We've fought over territory, resources, religious beliefs, political ideologies, and sometimes just because we were bored and wanted to see who had the better army. We even fought a war that lasted 100 years, which is impressive when you consider that most of the people who started it were dead long before it ended. But surely, Krekstar says, his voice carrying the tone of someone desperately clinging to a worldview that's rapidly disintegrating, you must have natural predators that keep your population in check. Jake laughs, and it's not a particularly reassuring sound. Professor, we don't have natural predators. We are natural predators. We're just really bad at it by traditional standards, so we had to get creative. Let me tell you about persistence hunting, Professor, Jake says, settling back in his chair with the comfortable air of someone about to share their favorite bedtime story, except this particular bedtime story is going to give everyone in the room nightmares for the rest of their academic careers. Oh, picture this. You're a gazelle, right? Fast, agile, built for speed. You can outrun pretty much anything on 4 legs. Then you see this weird, hairless ape thing jogging toward you. Not sprinting, just jogging. So you run away because obviously, and you easily outpace the weird ape thing. Problem solved, right? Pip has managed to achieve a state of attention so intense that she appears to have transcended her species' natural panic responses. Thrum's geological features are arranged in what might be described as horrified fascination. Wrong, Jake continues, his cheerful tone completely at odds with what he's describing. Because here's the thing about humans. We don't get tired. Well, we do, but not the way other animals do. We're built for endurance. So that gazelle runs away, stops to catch its breath, and then sees the same weird ape thing still jogging toward it. Still not sprinting, just maintaining that same steady pace. Professor Krekstar's claws have unconsciously extended slightly, a defensive response that he probably doesn't even realize he's displaying. The gazelle runs away again, and again, and again. Each time it has to run faster and further to get away from the weird ape thing that just keeps coming. And here's the beautiful part. Eventually, the gazelle's body temperature rises to the point where it can't regulate its own heat anymore. It goes into hyperthermia and literally cooks itself from the inside out. That's... Krekstar starts, then stops. His brain appears to be processing information that doesn't fit into any existing category. That's not predation, that's psychological warfare, right? And the human doesn't even have to be particularly fast or strong. We just have to be stubborn enough to keep following something until it dies of exhaustion. We're basically the galaxy's most polite serial killers. Zilla makes a sound that might be whimpering if butterflies could whimper, which apparently they can under the right circumstances. But wait, there's more, Jake says, because apparently he's decided that everyone in the room hasn't suffered enough psychological trauma for one day. We also figured out projectile weapons pretty early in our development. And I don't mean like throwing rocks, though we're weirdly good at that too. I mean precision projectile weapons. Many species use projectile weapons, Krekstar points out, though his voice lacks its earlier confidence. Yeah, but here's the thing. Most species throw things overhand, right? It's the natural motion, uses the big muscle groups, pretty intuitive. Humans throw things sidearm, with a whip-like motion that uses our entire body as a kinetic chain. We can throw a rock hard enough to crack skulls from 50 meters away, and accurate enough to hit a target the size of your eye. Jake mimes the throwing motion, and everyone in the room instinctively flinches away from his harmless-looking arm. We're so good at throwing things that we invented sports around it. Baseball, football, javelin, shot put. We throw things for fun, Professor. We have competitions to see who can throw things the farthest, the most accurately, the hardest. We have professional athletes whose entire career is based on their ability to throw a ball really, really well. This is disturbing, Thrum rumbles, his geological voice carrying overtones of something that might be existential dread. But we're just getting started, Jake says, and his enthusiasm is becoming genuinely terrifying. Let me tell you about our relationship with other species on our planet. Professor Krekstar looks like he's beginning to regret his career choices. I'm almost afraid to ask. So we've got these things called wolves, right? Apex predators in their own right. Pack hunters, really efficient killing machines. Most species either avoid them or get eaten by them. Humans looked at wolves and thought, you know what? Those guys seem cool. Let's make them our friends. You befriended apex predators? Better than that. We domesticated them. Selectively bred them until they became completely dependent on us for survival. We turned wolves into dogs, Professor. We took one of nature's most efficient killing machines and turned them into pets that we dress up in little sweaters and teach to fetch sticks. The silence that follows this revelation is profound. It's the kind of silence that occurs when everyone in the room suddenly realizes that their fundamental understanding of reality has been quietly violated. And it gets worse, Jake continues, apparently mistaking horrified silence for rapt attention. We did it to other species too. We took wild horses and made them carry us around. We took wild cattle and made them into walking hamburger factories. We looked at chickens, which are basically tiny dinosaurs, and decided they would make excellent egg-laying machines. You enslaved other predators, Krekstar says slowly. Enslaved is such an ugly word. We preferred domesticated for mutual benefit, though I guess from the animal's perspective there might not be much difference. But here's the really disturbing part. We didn't just domesticate animals for work or food. We domesticated them because we thought they were cute. It makes a small squeaking sound that might be her species' equivalent of a nervous breakdown. We have an entire industry built around keeping small, fluffy animals as companions. Cats, rabbits, hamsters, guinea pigs. We breed them to be as adorable as possible. Then we keep them in our homes and feed them and pet them and talk to them like they're our children. We've weaponized cuteness, Professor. This explains so much about your species' expansion into the galaxy, Krekstar murmurs, and there's something in his voice that sounds dangerously close to respect. Or terror. It's hard to tell the difference at this point. Oh, you haven't heard about our expansion yet, Jake says, and somehow his grin gets even more unsettling. See, the thing about humans is that we're really, really good at adapting to new environments. Most species evolve to fit specific ecological niches, right? Humans just change the environment to fit us. Change the environment. We're like the galaxy's most successful invasive species. We show up on a planet, look around, and decide what we want to keep and what needs to go. Too cold, we build heaters. Too hot, air conditioning. Hostile wildlife, we either kill it, domesticate it, or turn it into a tourist attraction. Jake's voice takes on the tone of someone describing their favorite hobby, which in a way, he is. We've terraformed entire planets, Professor. We've taken lifeless rocks floating in space and turned them into garden worlds. We've looked at environments that would kill most species in minutes and thought, you know what this place needs? A shopping mall. Professor Krekstar is staring at Jake with an expression that suggests he's beginning to understand why humans were admitted to the Galactic Academy in the first place, and it probably wasn't because of their academic credentials. We're not apex predators in the traditional sense, Jake continues, apparently oblivious to the fact that he's systematically dismantling everyone's worldview. We're something much worse. We're adaptive persistence predators, with tool-making capabilities and a complete lack of natural fear responses. We're the thing that evolution builds when it wants to see what happens if you give problem-solving intelligence to a species that's too stubborn to die. The room has gotten very, very quiet. Even the specimens in the jars seem to have stopped their eternal floating to pay attention to what Jake is saying. Plus, Jake adds, as if the previous revelations weren't quite enough, we reproduce really fast. We're incredibly social. And we have this weird psychological quirk where we actually get more dangerous when we're scared or threatened. Most species have a flight response when faced with something bigger and stronger than them. Humans have a fight response, even when the fight is completely hopeless. You fight predators that are stronger than you? Zilla manages to whisper. All the time. It's like our species motto, hold my beer and watch this. We've got documented cases of individual humans taking on creatures 10 times their size, armed with nothing but improvised weapons and sheer bloody-minded determination. Usually they die, but sometimes they win, and when they win, they turn it into a story that inspires other humans to try even stupider things. Jake pauses, looking around the room at the faces of his classmates. They're all staring at him with expressions that range from fascination to outright terror. So yeah, Professor, you're right that according to traditional predator-prey models, humans shouldn't exist. The fact that we do exist should probably be considered a warning sign. The silence that follows Jake's casual declaration stretches on for so long that it starts to take on a life of its own. It's the kind of silence that archaeologists might discover thousands of years from now, perfectly preserved in the academic amber of Room 42B, and wonder what kind of catastrophic event could have produced such profound quiet. Professor Krekstar is the first to break it, and when he speaks, his voice carries the tone of someone who has just realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe was wrong. And he's not entirely sure how he feels about that. Human Martinez, he says slowly. I believe I need to revise my lesson plan. Jake perks up with the enthusiasm of someone who has just successfully explained their favorite hobby to a group of interested friends, completely oblivious to the fact that he's just systematically terrorized an entire classroom. Oh, that's awesome, Professor. Are we going to cover human behavioral patterns next? Because I've got some great stories about our mating rituals that I think everyone would find really educational. The collective sound that emerges from the rest of the class can best be described as the noise a group of small animals might make when they realize the predator they've been hiding from has just invited them over for dinner to discuss the finer points of being eaten. Perhaps, Krekstar says quickly, we should focus on more general interspecies dynamics for now. He moves to the holographic display, which is still showing the cheerfully misleading breakdown of human anatomy. With a few quick gestures, he updates it to include a new classification that makes everyone in the room distinctly uncomfortable. Class, I would like to introduce a new category to our predator hierarchy: anomalous apex predators. These are species that have achieved apex predator status through methods that defy conventional biological wisdom. The display updates to show a new section labeled Approach with Extreme Caution and Possibly Snacks. The primary identifying characteristic of an anomalous apex predator, Krekstar continues, his lecture voice taking on the tone of someone reading safety warnings on hazardous materials, is that they appear harmless right up until the moment they demonstrate why they're actually the most dangerous thing in any given ecosystem. Jake raises his hand again, and everyone else in the room instinctively moves slightly away from him. Yes, Human Martinez? Quick question, Professor. When you say approach with snacks, what kind of snacks are we talking about? Because I'm pretty partial to those little cheese cracker things, but I'm not sure if that's what you meant. I meant, Krekstar says with the patience of someone explaining quantum physics to a particularly enthusiastic golden retriever, that other species should bring offerings of food when attempting to establish peaceful contact with humans. Oh, that makes sense. We do like food. Though honestly, you don't need to bring snacks. We're pretty friendly most of the time. It's only when we're scared or bored or protecting something we care about that we get all creative with the violence. Pip makes a sound that might be her species' equivalent of taking notes, which is impressive considering that her previous contribution to the class had been achieving new levels of paralytic terror. "Professor," she squeaks, her voice barely audible. "Should we be writing this down?" "Yes, Ms. Pip. In fact, I think Human Martinez here should serve as a case study for the remainder of the semester." Krextar's gaze settles on Jake, with something that might be respect, or might be the look of someone who has just realized they've been sharing a classroom with a live grenade. "Would you be willing to serve as a teaching assistant for this course, Human Martinez?" "Really? That sounds awesome. I'd love to help explain human behavioral patterns to everyone. We're actually pretty fascinating when you get past the whole looks like prey but acts like a apex predator thing." And that's how Jake Martinez became the first human teaching assistant in the history of Xenobiology 101, a position that came with the unofficial title of Living Example of Why Evolution Sometimes Has a Sense of Humor. The rest of the semester proceeded with Jake cheerfully explaining various aspects of human civilization to a classroom full of students who took very, very careful notes. Topics covered included human pack bonding behaviors, which explained why humans will risk their lives to save other species they've never met before, human problem-solving methodologies, which mostly involved hitting things until they worked or exploded, whichever came first, and human recreational activities, which turned out to be a surprisingly comprehensive catalog of ways to simulate mortal danger for entertainment purposes. By the end of the semester, Professor Krextar had completely rewritten his curriculum to include an entire section on species that should not exist but do anyway, and what that means for everyone else. His academic papers on the subject became required reading at predator-prey dynamics conferences across the galaxy. Pip developed what could only be described as a healthy respect for humans, along with a detailed evacuation plan for any planet that humans decided to colonize. Thrum, whose geological composition made him naturally stoic, began experiencing what he described as sedimentary anxiety whenever the topic of human expansion came up. And Zilla started having dreams about human terraforming projects, which her therapist described as perfectly rational nightmares about ecological disruption. The final exam consisted of a single question: explain why humans should not exist according to conventional predator-prey models, and then explain why they do exist anyway. Every student passed, mostly because the alternative was thinking too hard about the implications of sharing a galaxy with a species that had turned warfare into both an art form and a recreational activity. As for Jake, he graduated with honors and immediately enrolled in advanced interspecies diplomacy, where his first assignment was to explain human concepts like paintball, extreme sports, and reality television to a classroom full of species that had previously considered themselves the galaxy's apex predators. His opening lecture began with the words, "So, who wants to learn about a fun little Earth game we call laser tag?" and ended with the entire Galactic Diplomatic Corps quietly updating their threat assessment protocols. But that, as they say, is another story entirely. The important thing is that Jake Martinez, through the simple act of applauding at inappropriate moments and maintaining a cheerful disposition, while casually describing his species' history of creative violence, managed to single-handedly redefine the academic understanding of predator-prey relationships across 17 star systems. And he did it all while taking notes and asking if anyone wanted to grab lunch after class. Because that's what humans do. We show up, we're friendly, we're helpful, and we completely redefine everyone's understanding of what's possible, usually while asking if anyone wants to try something new that we invented called trust falls or extreme sports or democracy. We're not the apex predators the galaxy expected. We're the apex predators the galaxy never saw coming, and by the time everyone figures out what we are, we've already invited them over for a barbecue and taught their kids how to play soccer. And honestly, when you think about it, that might be the most terrifying thing of all.